Dude, I mean, when we first talked with you and Serenity so many moons ago, I mean, like it just makes so much sense. We were talking and we were saying like, what's the most nutrient dense food a baby should eat? Well, it's probably breast milk. And then you look at like conventional wisdom, medical wisdom, it's like little kids are eating shit. It's all
Yeah.
sugar, it's processed. A lot of it's just oddly shelf stabled with other types of secondary stabilizers and it's like, dude, what about meat? Like, why are so few children eating meat? And there's just something where people are afraid to feed babies meat. But babies have been able to eat meat, and they've eaten meat for hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah.
I mean, like we didn't have the luxury of like grinding up, like pureeing avocados for tens of thousands of years. And so like what did the indigenous do? What did the original native inhabitants of this land did? They took things like liver, like bone marrow, more soft textured foods, and they would pulverize them and then the babies would eat them.
You are listening to Dedicated Joe, the new dad's guide on the upending and transformational experience of becoming a father.
We are dedicated.
My guest today is a personal friend and huge inspiration, Taylor Collins. He is a first-generation bison rancher. He's the co-founder of Epic Bar and Force of Nature Meats. He's a proud girl dad of two amazing daughters, ages 3 and 8. Taylor is pioneering the regenerative farming movement and how we think about meat, sustainability, and parenting. In this episode, we talk about his journey from plant-based endurance athlete to meat advocate, how giving up veganism saved his wife's health, and what it really means to raise strong daughters in today's world. Let's get into it.
All right. Well, super glad to have you here, Taylor.
Joe, it's a pleasure, man. Thanks for inviting me.
My wife, Sereny, and I were really lucky to be introduced to you and Katie through the Paleo scene right after we had the idea for the Paleo baby food company. Somebody knew you, was like, you got to talk to these guys. They just sold Epic Bar and they're like, they know paleo business in and out. So we're like, okay, it's really cool. We went into your office and Katie was like 6 months pregnant. So it was perfect timing. We're like, okay. I think you said you'd thought about making a meat baby food. So we're like, well, if they thought of doing it, this must be a good idea. I remember we were a little further along than you thought. We even made you sign an NDA and you're like, whoa, this is,
Yeah.
they're like serious over here. So I think that was, I remember that. But, you were instrumental to helping us realize how big it could be. Like we thought of it as very small before we met you. And you're like, oh, this is retail. This is national. This is going to be huge. You told us these big revenue numbers we were going to do, which we ended up doing almost exactly the revenue numbers that you predicted the first 3 years. And then you introduced us to regenerative meats, which, we knew the grass-fed meat thing was big, great for babies, great for health, tastes great. But then you realized it could actually make the planet better. Or it could reverse climate change with the way we're raising meat. Like nobody knew anything about that. Like you guys were pioneers on that. And we were like, well, this is for us. We're on board with this. Dedicate ourselves to the regenerative supply chain. And then you told us, do not make a bison product
I remember that.
because there's no bison. It's so hard to find. And then by the time we made our bison product, we were buying bison from you.
Yeah.
You would start a bison farm.
That was a decade ago.
Yeah, it was a long time
We're all
ago.
young pups.
Rome was amazing. We brought our team out there a bunch. We brought our daughter out there every turkey harvest. Ever since she was born, we've come to your turkey harvested a turkey, been out there, watched your little girls grow up.
Bring your team
so
out
cool.
there, which is also cool.
Yep.
Like your employees get to share in that celebration. So you guys are living it, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, really proud of y'all's journey. I mean, it's incredible. I remember that when we first met, the office room that we sat in was called the Zen Den.
That's right.
And we were like on the floor, and you guys were just this dreamy, young, idealistic couple, just had like a heart of gold, pursuing this really genuine ambition, but also like just beginning. So like the journey, you were preparing for the journey, the hike up to the top of Mount Everest. And you guys had such a cool vision at the right time and just executed on it. Brilliant packaging out of the gates.
We used your packaging designer, so that's why it was the most expensive bill we paid.
But it was worth it.
It was so worth it. Those packaging beautiful, and a lot of people
guys
thought we
crushed
were the
it.
epic baby food, and I
guys
was very
crushed it.
proud of that. I was like, yes, we are the epic.
Let's do it.
Yes, so that's great. Well, awesome. So how did you end up in the meat biz? Tell me that story.
Man, it's a funny story because if we look at the genesis or the origin, it's not where most people would think. We didn't grow up as, hunters, meat enthusiasts, but truly when Katie and I started dating, we actually went to the polar opposite extreme of vegetarian plant-based. We thought this is how you optimize human nutrition. Keep in mind, this was before social media.
Yeah.
This is like the dark days where conventional mainstream wisdom, like whatever narrative mainstream media wanted to drive, that was what you believed. And there wasn't a lot of counter arguments and points and research and information known. And so we went vegetarian, and we were competing at really high levels in endurance sports. And that was the biggest mistake that we ever made. My wife was having tons of health issues, and it was essentially her body was breaking down. I mean, she was like turning into an 80-year-old woman, right before my eyes. And she had this crazy knee injury. And I always, I like to say that if we were still vegetarian/vegan today, I guarantee you she would have had that leg either amputated or she'd be on chronic pain meds for the rest of her life,
Wow.
which would be wild to have like a peg leg pirate wife.
Yeah. Who was a pro athlete
Who
previously.
was, exactly.
Yeah.
And like, okay, she was 20 years old. Come
Yeah.
on, like she's in her prime and just having all these mysterious autoimmune issues. So I went to see a functional health doctor, and the doctor said, "What are you guys eating?" And we thought, doc, this is a slam dunk kind of question. Are you teeing us up for me to tell you how badass we're eating beans? We're eating rice, raw vegetables. We're juicing. Like this is 30 seconds into this conversation. He's like, let me stop you there. Here's what I want you to do. Like diagnosis done. Crazy, right? And this is before paleo. And so he's like, I want you to start eating grass-fed, pasture-raised meats. I want you to start cooking your vegetables, but make that like a secondary thing. I want meat to be the primary serving on your plate. And so, like our backs were against the wall. We had nothing to lose. We went for it. And
was that hard? Was there a psychological like, oh, but I'm vegan, or identity crisis?
For sure, dude. We had a vegan energy bar company called Thunderbird Energetica. It still goes strong. It's still a vegan company, but that was our identity. That was our culture. That was our community. And we were preaching that message, and that was our identity. And so we had this moment of like egoic death where we had to kind of reinvent ourselves and reinvent our peers and our cohort friend group, because we got a lot of like weird breakup letters from vegans that were like, I mean, it kind of in retrospect was a cult. It was, hey, you guys are no longer doing this. Fuck you guys. I don't want anything to do with you. And so that was weird, but it was the best decision we ever made in our life. No looking back. So much possibility and potential moving forward. And so, I mean, I don't know. I think that's just a reoccurring message and of hope. It's like pivot. Like, what is life giving you? Like, why would you keep driving in a direction that's wrong? Like, have the humility to be able to pivot and do something different. It was weird, but we cooked meat again and ate meat, and like the exuberance towards life, our vitality. I always think about these videos, like viral videos of maybe like soldiers coming back from war and surprising their wife when she didn't expect him. Maybe it's like an anniversary and he just shows up, like opens the door and someone's filming it and she's like crying and he's crying and they hug each other. That's how it felt emotionally eating meat again.
You were with a T-bone. You were like,
yes, it was like, oh my God, it's beyond physical, it's spiritual and emotional bliss. And so, yeah, let's go. I've devoted our life to meat and all things meat ever since.
Wow, that's great. I was vegetarian vegan for about 4 years.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I also had a lot of health issues. I was actually digging meat out of trash cans to like eat meat because I didn't want to create economic demand. I was like a environmentalist vegan. I didn't really buy into the health stuff at all, but it was like, it just felt like wrong to buy it from the factory farms or something, but I could eat it if it was waste. So I was like so hungry. I was like literally digging out of trash cans and I thought that was normal for a while until figured out that this was actually what my body needed.
See, I get that perspective. And a lot of people do. And if you look at the conventional industrial meat, so the majority of meat that people consume, you're right. If that was the only option, shit, I'm digging out of the trash can with you. Like we're high-fiving, like sharing a T-bone or a ribeye, probably more a ribeye. But if there is a more virtuous, better option, which is this regenerative movement, which animals are part of the system, then it's like if we opt out and we decide not to buy meat, then we're not voting for the better, more virtuous system, which is like a desecration. It allows the incumbent destructive system to perpetuate. So bravo to you, 4 years, smash that.
Yeah, it's like if all the people who care about what they eat, of all the people who are voting with their dollar for better food, which isn't that many people, unfortunately, if they all go vegetarian, then who buys meat from the people doing it right?
Exactly. Yeah. Our money is energy, and where do you want the energy to flow? Who do you want to incentivize and reward? And for me, it's the land stewards and the ranchers that are creating that net positive return, that are being keystone species and creating a disproportionate positive impact on the land all day long. I mean, like you go out to the best managed farm growing monocultures of plants and even in an organic setting out in my neck of the woods and west of Austin, or you look at a regenerative meat ranch like Rome Ranch, I mean, it's just so obvious which one is more coherent with nature, which one is emulating the beauty and the diversity of a functioning ecosystem, which is always going to be that system where animals are part of it. Because when you only grow crops year over year, it's very extractive. You're constantly battling, forcing your will upon nature, and it's a relationship that's based on domination.
Yeah, and it's not natural. I mean, there's no ecosystem on the planet that doesn't have animals actively engaged in addition to the plants.
Yeah, and the reason that you and I are here today having this conversation is because we have thousands of generations of ancestors. I mean, this blows my mind. That hunted in community settings, that harvested animals. I mean, that was like a sacred rite of passage, a very spiritual thing for humans in our evolution that we've only been disconnected from for, man, maybe 150 years. But up until that, I mean, meat was the difference of life and death. And like the reason, again, that we're here today is because our ancestors were phenomenal hunters. And so it's like, why are we gonna fight that?
Right.
Who we are, our identity, our culture, our people, our legacy.
So you came to veganism and then eventually meat via health. How did what role did the environment play, or how did you end up becoming also these kind of environmentalist meat advocates?
We wanted to feed people the highest degree of nutrient density. And so for us, it was very obvious, all right, this is going to be an animal. This is going to be a grass-fed, pasture-raised animal. So something that is consuming a diet it was biologically engineered to consume, and then expressing that animal's innate, in an environment that it also was evolutionarily invited to co-create with. And so, you got like animal nutrition, human nutrition. We thought that was all that there was to it. We watched a TED Talk by Alan Savory, and that changed the trajectory and the course of everything because we missed the most important leg of the stool, which was all health, whether you're vegetarian or you're full-on carnivore, comes from the soil. It all begins in the soil. You are what your food eats. And so if you're eating bison that's grazed on degraded, non-biodiverse farm fields with low fertility, then the nutrients that bison could fix is going to be very limited. And so we said, shit, if we want to feed people the most nutrient-dense product on the planet, we got to build soil. We got to invest, put back in what's been extracted for over 150 years. And that's true. That's the truest celebration of what it means to eat regeneratively and feed our community how we wish to be fed.
So it still was physical health based, but your realization was that the health of the planet and the health of people and the health of the animal, it's all interrelated and you can't just do one or the other.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of the checks and balances of nature. I mean, it's like how we are fulfilled physically is inseparable from how we are filled emotionally, spiritually. It's all connected. And if you try to separate that, then you're taking a very linear approach, which as human species, we tend to do, and we don't appreciate the complexity of nature. And we need to have more humility and recognize that there's a lot of interrelationships that we'll never be able to completely comprehend and wrap our head around. But as a general rule of thumb, like if it tastes good, if it was raised well, then it's probably good for the planet and it's good for your body.
Yeah, thanks. That complexity, it's a good segue into fatherhood. How did you decide you want to be a dad? What made you want that?
Joe, yeah. We, that was, I think, have you read the book Call the Wild?
Yeah.
Jack London. It's like an old school book.
Yeah, old school.
But it's, I think like how we've lived our life has been kind of like Buck, the dog from that book, in the sense that we've been moving further and further away from domestication towards more of like a wild lifestyle. And I think becoming a dad is such a biological, innate, evolutionary trait. And somewhere in our journey of like trying to rewild ourselves, it just, the call to be a dad was so loud. And I mean, my wife, Katie, she's amazing. She's beautiful. She's lovely. Like to be able to be married to her and have a baby with her is, I mean, I just felt like if I didn't, that would be an abomination. She's just so perfect. And so it was all that. But ultimately, like for me, like being a dad was just a biological calling. And there was many years of my life where I never saw that happening. But as nature has a way of inspiring us, it's like looking around, like everything reproduces. And this is something that we want to do. And we want to have a little kid. And so that was the catalyst. And we went for it all in.
Did you decide the timing, was that intentional with the sale of Epic and the pregnancy, or was that?
It was very well timed. I think like, Epic, maybe even Serenity Kids for You, like that's probably our first baby.
Yeah.
That was our first child. And so to really do right by Della or Scout, our first girl, like we had to be in a place to where not all of our energy and efforts was going to a business. And so we kind of parted ways. It felt like Epic was at a point in its maturation where it was like going off to college, like high five, kiddo. I think you're going to live in this world. Good luck at university. Maybe don't get indoctrinated, but just do your best. And I believe in you. And then it gave us that bandwidth to kind of free up and start over again with Scout.
Yeah, that's great. And so you sold the business. You decide to get pregnant. This is a good time. How was the pregnancy? What was that like for you? What role did you play?
Yeah, dude, shout out for moms, because us sitting here talking about it, I mean, it's hard.
Yeah.
Being a dad is the real deal, especially being a good dad, right?
Mhm.
Like, I feel like you can just kind of fake it and technically be a father,
Yeah.
but that doesn't make you a loving, caring dad. And so I think what we're talking about is like this role as a father in which we're doubling down and really supporting our wives. But, like, going through that pregnancy with Katie, her being the pregnant one, I just saw the most amazing expression of inward, downward energy. And it's like seasonally that happens. I think if it was a season, it would be like winter. If it was a holiday, it'd be Advent, but it was like all of the energy was going inward and creating new life. And that expression was building and building, and there was anticipation. And so being able to participate in that was just, life affirming and humbling and spiritual as much as it was physical. But food was a huge part of that.
How did you participate? Obviously you can feed her.
Yeah, I was the man slave.
Yeah.
Down for that role, just trying to pick up the slack and support her emotionally, physically. Just trying to, like relieve any burdens so she could just double down on what was the most important thing in our life, which is a baby brewing in, her little oven, growing every day. So yeah, I've always been the cook in the family, but it was time to step up and really be more conscious about the foods that we were eating.
Like what? What were the best foods for pregnancy?
If you're like rewilded, I think you have more connection to your instinct of what your body needs. And so Katie she was like craving fatty foods. Makes sense. Growing neurological system of a child in your body, this brain tissue. And it's really important to have that healthy fat. But she was also craving, out of all things, lamb meat. We might like dab in lamb. I appreciate a good lamb, but we were like doubling down. We were eating lamb like twice a week. So I had to step up the lamb cooking game and find out different recipes.
So meats, obviously the fats were like mostly saturated fats.
Bro, yes.
Butter and bone broth.
And heavy with meats.
Bacon and...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, as much healthy animal fat as we could get, avocados if we were going to do plant-based stuff, even some coconut oil. But yeah, it was, an innate instinct, a call to avoid lean meats, which now... She's not pregnant. She's back on like, hey, I'd like a tenderloin or a lean ribeye, something with some chew in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So lots of meats, and then just trusting her instincts.
Yep.
Yeah. That's awesome. And you started Rome around that time too? You moved out to Rome while she was pregnant?
Yeah. We bought the ranch, maybe early on in her pregnancy. And we had been thinking about that for a long, long time. That was one of the beautiful parts about Epic, our first company, in which we were able to visit these suppliers, see landscapes that were regenerating, and really have like this physical, visceral reaction to what that looks like, what that feels. And so it was always in our mind, like that would be the highest calling. If we could ever be on land ourselves, double down on this legacy and this mission that we've been preaching for so many years and actually raise animals, bring people out to reconnect with nature. That's what we want to do. And so, yeah, purchase the land, all in. Kind of held it, didn't do much while Katie was pregnant, and then she gave birth. And obviously that was the focus, that was the excitement. But early on, we were kind of doing day trips out to the ranch.
You were still living in Austin at that point. The Scout was born here, and then you moved out.
Yeah, we didn't have any facilities there. We built a yurt.
Yurts, that's the
the
original. Yeah, I slept there last time I deer hunted.
Did you really?
Yeah, I was like,
nice.
That yurt. She does the original.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that was.
There's only a handful of people that have slept in there, and you're one of them, so that's funny. Yeah, I love that. That yurt it's going strong. It's like Mongolian inspired and survived all types of windstorms. And every now and then the bison will be grazing in that pasture. And if you happen to be sleeping in the yurt at that time, it's not uncommon in the middle of the night for them to get on the porch and just start like rubbing on the walls.
That's
which
funny.
I imagine that'd be kind of scary to wake up like that.
That would be. Yeah, that's great. And so, what kind of birth experience did you guys choose to have?
We did a natural birth at a birthing clinic here in Austin, which was, that was the goal. Is it Mike Tyson that says like everyone has a plan until you get freaking smashed in the face?
Yes.
That was we had a plan. It was like this beautiful, peaceful birth that was just really thoughtful. And we did a lot of pre-work and thought we were there mentally and emotionally, and then got smacked in the face. And, like Katie, with our first kid, she was in labor for like 36 hours. It was intense, man. She pushed for 4 hours of that. And it was like this really wild experience, because I've honestly never seen, it was like peeking beneath the veil, in which kind of towards the end of this, like, I think Katie was seeing two dimensions. I mean, she was like in a spiritual place and a physical place, like going through that manifestation of like some spiritual energy to physical matter with a child. I mean, witnessing that, I thought that was the closest I've ever seen anyone come to death. And even though she probably didn't almost come to die, it felt like she was. So it was heart-wrenching to watch. But I mean, women are just badass, as you know. And she just was able to work through it, and whatever it took.
You stayed at the birth center. It was able to come out eventually. It took a longer than you thought.
I mean, to maybe Katie's fault, she just refuses to quit.
Yeah.
And so she adhered to the plan, and it wasn't as pretty as we had anticipated, but we pivoted, and she just worked her ass off.
Were they recommending
got it done.
C-section or something, or what did they?
It was it was one of these things where she was like 2 weeks, Scout was in her belly 2 weeks past her due date.
Yeah.
And so that was already this window, like, hey, if that baby doesn't come out in the next 24 hours, we're going to have to induce labor, and you're probably going to have to do that more conventionally. And so thank God Scout kind of like heard that inside. She was just chilling in there, and she decided to come out. And there was never a moment where they were about to rush her out of there, but there was moments where Katie like felt like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I got nothing left. Like,
right.
I'm so depleted. She's done like the most amazing Ironman races you could ever imagine. Won and competed, and is like has so much grit and determination. That for her was the hardest thing she's ever done in her life.
Yeah.
Hands down.
36 hours.
36 hours.
That's crazy.
Yeah. God bless the first time mamas out there.
And what role did you play during that whole time?
Leader, but also carefully choosing my words, like whether it was like a pump up moment or just like a shut up moment, could switch on a dime. I just, again, just manslave. What do you need?
Yeah. Servant.
Yeah. Can I touch you here? Okay. Maybe that felt good for 2 minutes. And then if she said, get away from me. Okay. Don't get my feelings hurt. I understand. And so trying to just be really present and trying to take any kind of pain or hardship, but that's a burden to bear for a woman. And she just crushed it.
Wow. Did you get scared?
I definitely got scared.
Yeah. How'd you deal with your fear and that the plan's all smashed to hell? Are we going to have to go to the hospital or not? Or is she going to die? Like all that. How'd you deal with that?
Dude, it's almost like not the same as hunting, but in a way, like when you hunt, you're just hyper focused. Like when you're looking through a scope, this, like there's one thing in mind, and that's to harvest meat in a really ethical way. And like everything else, you kind of like have tunnel vision in that moment. And so there was maybe an instinct, evolutionary drive to be hyper focused and present. And even though I was scared, having a badass birthing team of midwives there to just kind of normalize things that to an outside perspective or a first time participant seem fucking crazy, for them to say, this is normal. She's doing good. We're progressing. You can do it. It's like having your own personal hype squad. So it was, balancing that, but also just trying to really focus energy on life, on light, on love. Because once you start spiraling and going down those deeper, darker paths of negative thought, like you just gotta be careful that you're not manifesting something like that. And so it's really just trying to stay positive, trying to see like, we're almost at the end. We're almost at the end. Let's go. You got this.
That's awesome. That sounds pretty rough. And then you guys decided to do it again. How was the second one?
Dude, the second one, Rin was just such a blessing. And it was a little bit different plan. We decided to do a home birth on the ranch, which was so legit, so dreamy. And we had midwives out there, and it was awesome, but it was just too much. I mean, again, like Katie just was in like pain cave, deepest, darkest time and matter and space, transcending time. And so at the end of that, we did pull the plug, and we got in the truck and bombed to a birthing clinic in Fredericksburg. It was like the emergency room entrance of a hospital. And it was scary. It was in the middle of the night. And it was time. It just wasn't happening. It wasn't progressing.
It was like the birthing unit of a hospital.
Yeah. Katie was in a lot of pain. And that was scary because, like we're just a little bit less into conventional wisdom. conventional medicine,
Yeah,
dude.
it's scary.
If you're not skeptical about what a doctor tells you to do, you're not living in a reality that's predicated on the incentives of the doctor, which is to bill. And so that for me was the scariest thing. It's like, oh my gosh, we're going to get now coerced to do all this bullshit that doesn't resonate with us, that we're going to get manipulated, like our fear. We're not going to have like the supportive cheerleader, but instead someone saying, hey, you need to get a hepatitis shot for this 1-hour-old baby.
Jeez. Did you bring a doula or a midwife with you, like the person who was at the home?
We did, yes. Luckily, she rode with them.
Yeah.
Which was cool because she was there again, just kind of like being a cheerleader, getting our back, helping us navigate and making sure that even though we did have a birthing plan, we were deviating from it, but also we could do our best to adhere to our values. And
you had a hospital birthing plan for this contingency.
Oh, we didn't have a contingency.
Yeah.
But she helped us take our original idea, kind of like the ethos and the values of a natural home birth to a hospital.
Okay, got it.
And it was badass. I mean, it happened really quick. A lot of the fear abated, and the team there was actually pretty great. And they gave Katie like a spinal tap where she just like went, didn't feel like wasn't in 10 out of 10 pain. And then she could push, and she didn't have like that restrictive, kind of like inward negative reaction where it was like, the baby wasn't coming out when her pain died, and she had a natural vaginal birth, which was amazing.
Yeah, that's
pretty
great.
quick after we got
we had planned a home birth. We had a home birth birthing plan, and then we had a hospital birthing plan, and then we had a hospital C-section birthing plan. I had all three. So I just knew. And then we ended up with the worst case. We ended up with hospital C-section birthing plan, so I was glad I had it all planned out. But yeah, our home birth, also turned into hospital C-section birth, which was a bummer.
Why do you think it's so hard I just feel like the more people that I know, it's like women in our generation, they're just having a harder time, like having babies, not necessarily, yes, getting pregnant, but the actual process of giving birth seems to be like a challenge that everyone faces.
Yeah. I mean, it's I think the rewilding you talk about, it's like one of the most basic human wild things that we can do. And yet our society is so the opposite of everything wild. And so it's like, I think these things that should be very natural turn out to be very hard because they're counter to what we've been raised in for so many years, and just so much fear, so much shame, and so much body stuff. The medical industry, like the lack of nutrition in our food, and our parents' stuff and past life trauma, it all kind of compiles. But there's a lot of really great birth stories. Most of the men on the podcast have had really successful home births so far. So there are some really great success stories, but there are roughs like this, cases like you and me, where we plan for the best of the best, and it's sort of really a lot harder,
And that's the path too. And I think there's value in that because it's like, it's that challenge and that adversity that forges character and appreciation. And so like to feel the highest high of holding a brand new child, coming out of like spiraling a minute before that, being like, my wife is about to die. I mean, that polarity and emotions is like, I've never felt anything so powerful in my life.
Yeah. Della was breech. She was upside down and could not get her to flip. There's all this stuff on how you get them to flip. And you're like, oh, we're going to go get her to flip, but she would not flip. And her whole life, it's been that way. If she is a certain way or she wants to be a thing, like there is no changing her from that direction. So do you see some personality stuff in like Scout, for instance? She didn't want to come out till she was ready, and then took another 3 hours, 36 hours.
Yeah, dude. Of course. That's a good point. Yeah. I think our children are strongly opinionated, strong personalities, and they're kind of like bison. Like, you can't really hurt a bison. You just have to convince a bison that it's the bison's idea to move through the gate and stepping back. And yeah, maybe our girls are a little bit like that. They just inherently want to be in charge. But I think that's also something that maybe is more feminine energy. And I think right now, the little girls that are getting birthed into this point in time, they're all showing up with purpose and with reason. It's been too long where this like masculine energy is dominated and raped and taken from land, out of relationship, and it's like time for this feminine, caring, compassionate, loving energy to be fostered for the planet, for humanity. And so maybe this is like, that's the test. Like, these girls are coming out strong-willed and stubborn, but they're not going to compromise. So those are like traits that we should foster.
Yeah, that's great. I love the metaphor of the bison herding. So because I think this is a great metaphor for children. So how do you convince a bison to go through a gate? Like, how do you make it like it's their idea?
Man, you have to lock in on a bison. The herd is controlled by the matriarch. So it's not the boys that are calling the shots. The
Okay.
boys are there for one reason, which is to breed. And in the herd, the dynamics are controlled by the oldest female. The oldest, wisest female. And so you just have to get her to think it's a good idea to follow you. And so we've named our oldest matriarchs, and all we got to do is get one of them through the gate. We move our animals so much that they're accustomed to it. And so now it's positive feedback loop. It's like Pavlov's dog experiment.
They
where
know if they move, they're going to get better
Yeah,
grass,
dude.
better, better
Pavlov
treat.
rang the bell and the dog salivated. We do the bison call and the dog and the bison salivate. And so they're ready to go. Moving for them is awesome. It's fun.
And that's because they trust that you're going to move them somewhere better, I guess.
Exactly.
They know they're not going to another awful field or slaughter.
For sure. You
Yeah.
have to have that innate trust. If you don't have that trust, similar to a child, then they're not going to follow you. You're not going to be a good leader. And yeah, maybe one of the characteristics of being a leader is thinking about others before yourself. And so with your kid, with the bison herd, you have to have their vitality and their most basic fundamental needs met before you can like really fit into that paradigm and be a part of it.
Yeah, you talked about the masculine energy that's kind of messed up the planet. I also hear like a really strong positive masculine energy there around our role is to have the women feel safe and have what they need and feel trusted. And you jokingly use the term manslave, but there's like the servant leadership energy that I think is a really great metaphor for being a dad. Serving the woman, serving our kids. We're not passive, we're not pushovers, but we're also not dominating. We're not trying to make it about us.
For sure, dude. It's all about balancing the masculine and the feminine. And I just have such a love in my heart for other girl dads. I don't know if you've ever felt this, but like I can talk to someone for 5 minutes and tell them if they're a girl dad or a boy dad. Fucking love girl dads.
Wow.
And I just think
What are girl dads like? How can you?
Oh, your listeners are going to hate this if they're boy dads. I just feel like kind of back to your masculine energy. Think girl dads tend to have a more outward expression of masculine energy. They're more dominant. They're more protective. They work out hard.
Of that like positive masculine, like strong, protective, grounded.
All the best parts of the masculine archetype.
Huh.
They're rewarded with having beautiful little girls. Girls need strong masculine fathers, because if you want to normalize how your daughter gets treated for the rest of her life, when she picks a partner, she's going to look at how you as a father acted. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges and responsibilities as dads. It's to set that standard. It's to teach our young girls how they should be treated and loved and model that every single day. And then you get these just divine goddess-like children that are out to really enrich and spread that beautiful feminine energy to the world that needs it so badly.
It's great. Della's definitely a daddy's girl. I mean, she loves me. She was obsessed with time with me. And I guess you're right. I haven't really thought about how she really calls me to be more, like she paints my fingernails or whatever. And some dads get judged for like being feminized by their girls or whatever. But I think you're right. It's like it almost calls me to be more powerful, more masculine.
Yeah. I have this theory that guys, so someone told me this and I've been kind of like bro math, bro science looking at it. And it seems to me that dads who sweat a lot in the process of like when they're planning to have a kid. So like when you're starting to, plan having a kid with your wife and you're like breeding every day, hoping to get some conception. If you're a dad who sweats, whether that's like lifts heavy ass weights, gets in the gym, runs, who told me there's like an actual physiological thing that happens with your balls in which they get really hot and it disproportionately advantages the X chromosome in your sperm, and the little girls have a better chance of coming to fruition.
Interesting.
And I kind of see that, like, it seems to me like these CEO dads that are kind of, like really brilliant, working all day, working hard, great people, but aren't like out there sweating, physically using their bodies, manual labor, going to the gym. I don't know, like.
Interesting.
There's a difference between what the percentile likelihood of having a girl or a boy is.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, cool. So let's talk about that that time after the babies come. So both births kind of crazy. Babies here, especially the first one, I think is where it's especially disruptive. How did you deal with the kind of postpartum fourth trimester time? What was your role?
Yeah, again, support. We kind of went with the flow as first time parents. And for us, we're just a little bit more private, kind of inward people. And so we didn't, not like in The Lion King when little, what is it, Mufasa, Simba is taken up to the top of the mountain to show the kingdom and all the animals. We were more like, let's keep this joyous celebration more intimate and small. And so that was okay. That was just how we wanted to do it. But I think it was really predicated on like this moment. You only have this one moment in your life to imprint in the most primal way, which is, it was so awesome. I remember when Scout came out at the birthing center. Her eyes are closed. She can barely move because she's so small. And somehow she just crawled up Katie's body.
Oh, they did the boob crawl. I love
Find
the
her
boob
boob.
crawl.
Knew what she was doing. Got right on that nipple and started getting milk. And it's just like, holy smokes, that was amazing. And that's just like the importance of this imprint. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't want to do anything in a hospital, because we didn't want a baby to be taken from us. We wanted to hold it. We wanted to cherish it. We wanted to smell it and feel it. And have it know who its parents were. And so we were in imprint mode for a long time. But I think every animal in the animal kingdom does that. It's pretty natural.
And so did you have to actively keep people out? Like everybody's like, I want to see the baby. I want to see. And you had to be like, nope, not yet.
Yeah. And maybe some people got their feelers hurt. But, it's like this is your deal. This is between mom, dad, baby.
Did you plan that in advance? Did you know that was how you're going to want to be?
Yeah, we've just always kind of been more inclined.
More private.
That. Yeah, privacy.
How long did that last? How long before you started letting?
Maybe 2 weeks. Yeah, we had a pretty intense, small 2-week bonding session. And then, kind of felt more comfortable letting others hold the child.
Were you the primary sort of gatekeeper on that? Like, keeping people out?
Exactly. I had to be the bouncer of the club, admitting some people, kicking other people out. But it was fine. Our friends and family and parents understood. And so it worked well for us. But yeah, everyone's plan's different. There's not a right way to do it. That's just what was true to us.
And so you sort of prep people in advance, like, hey, we're going to want to take some time right after. Like, don't fly here just because the baby's being born, because we're not going to let you in anyway.
Exactly.
And like,
exactly.
You kept begging and you kept being not yet, but then eventually.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like announce this happened, send out text message, let everyone know so they felt included, and then, we'll reach out.
Okay.
And
how'd you know when it was time?
It just felt right. Yeah.
The 2 weeks was up. It's like, okay, I think she probably had a lot to do with that.
Totally. A little bit of cabin fever, time to, put that energy outward and upward. And it just felt right. We just roll with it.
So during that 2 weeks, you're basically doing all the cooking and cleaning and diaper changing.
Yes. Cooking, cleaning, diaper changing, holding, trying to soothe. First time parents, you don't really know what you're doing, and you kind of suck. You get it done, but in retrospect, you're like, man, I only knew, kind of thing. And so I did, one of the things that I did in retrospect, maybe it wasn't a good idea, but I would hold a Scout whenever we were trying to get her to go to sleep, because she really liked movement. She was in a moving body, an active body for 9 months. And so I would walk her around the house all night long in the middle of the night, just trying to get her to go to bed, or go on a stroller walk in the middle of the night, just trying to get her to fall asleep so Katie could get some rest. But that was like whatever I could do to fit in.
And you're saying that was something you think was a good thing, or you think that was maybe overdone?
It was overdone. It helped in the when you're in the moment of suffering and sleep deprivation, and it's the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. It's a pretty easy way to temporarily get the results that you're looking for, primarily your baby to sleep. But indirectly, you're also training your baby to need that movement and that body-to-body, skin-on-skin contact to sleep. Your long-term, at least in our case, we're doing ourselves a disservice because our child was now addicted to sleeping on us.
Yeah.
She didn't want anything to do about sleeping in a crib by herself. She's like, why would I ever do that? It's way more fun to sleep on you and listen to your heartbeat and to smell you or to breathe us in. Again,
did you do it differently with Ren?
We did do it differently with Ren. Yeah, we did some sleep training way earlier for her, and she just she crushed it.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of different stories. I think there is a lot of personality in this. Like, there's babies that love to be held and be, the co-sleeping thing is huge. Della would not have it. She did not want to sleep with us.
Wow.
Liked being by herself very early on. So we would be her in the room with us. We put her in a snuggle me on the dresser, actually, where she was it was like where we would leave her. She moved around a lot. She wanted her own space.
dude.
And so it's just like, yeah, so we could start trading nights really early where I would take a night, Serena would take a night. So we were alternating sleep nights.
Oh,
I would
she
bring
crushed it.
her to breastfeed, but then
Yeah.
that's all she had to do. So we could at least each get a full night's sleep
Dude,
every
what a
other
blessing.
night.
Yeah.
That was nice. So I'm not sure that Scott would have been I'm not sure, might have
That
just
did
been
not work.
personality.
Yeah, if we heard you saying that when we were in the pain cave, we would have
Right.
been like, Joe,
No.
you suck. Why'd you tell
Yeah.
us that? That's not fair. But yeah, you're right. A lot of it is personality driven.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the beautiful thing. It's like these kids, I mean, they're like, they have souls and their souls want to express themselves. Their soul is embodied and their soul knows what it wants to be. And so like to enforce your will and try to control and dominate who your child is going to turn into, it's just such a disservice rather than sitting back and witnessing that expression.
The Bison matriarch's not going to move. She's not going to move. You couldn't move her with a truck if you wanted to. Probably.
Yes. You try to force her, buddy, it's going the wrong. It's going south for you fast.
That's crazy. And so for you cook a lot. You said you're still the chef. So what food during postpartum? Anything different? Similar meats and fats?
Yep. Similar fats, similar meats, incorporating some fish afterwards. I don't know why. Again, Katie was craving these things. Collagen rich foods, because there's a lot of healing that has to happen for the mom.
That's like bone broth.
Oh yeah.
Collagen supplement.
Exactly. Even there's certain cuts of meat that are way higher in collagen, bioavailable collagen.
What cuts are those?
Any of the cuts that you can't cook hot and fast. So think about stuff that you have to braise or put in a crock pot that take time to get tender and to break down. That is loaded.
It's like the roasts and the things like that.
Exactly. And you can even do some custom grinds too if you process your own meat where you're, a lot of times at an abattoir when they're processing a bison or a cow, there's skilled butchers that will remove silver skin, collagen, point tissue, and then they set that aside. How I process it here, I like to keep that in there. When you grind it, it's also very forgiving. It can cook better in a cast iron or on a grill. And so, just get all of that, the whole food, beautiful matrix form, bioavailable collagen. So that was really big for postpartum nutrition.
So if you're harvest deer, for instance, you bring that to be processed, you would ask them to make sure not to set that aside, like just grind everything together.
And they would look at you like, you're fucking crazy.
Right.
They'd be like, what? That's not how you do it. And you're saying like, no, I want this deer processed so I get the highest bioavailable nutrients.
Right.
So leave that in. Oh, and by the way, can you also grind in the heart? Can you grind in the liver? Can you grind in the kidneys? I mean, you can go
just put it in there. You don't cook those separate. You just mix that with the grind and then you've got a nice mixture.
Out of sight, out of mind. So easy to prepare.
Meats. I know Force of Nature, you guys have really great organ meat blends. What role do organ meats play in your kind of diet? Pregnancy, birth, postpartum.
Yeah, it's everything. I mean, again, when we look at, it's just interesting how our modern civilization, when you look at the kind of conventional wisdom of postpartum nutrition, or even like pre-pregnancy nutrition, a conventional context, we avoid the most nutrient dense parts of the animals. And our ancestors knew this. I mean, even like 150 years ago, going back those thousands of generations of our forefathers and foremothers, they would celebrate. They would eat the organs first. I mean, it was like, and even wild animals still do that today. Like if a pack of wolves kill an elk or a cow in Montana, they're going right for the abdomen. They're opening it up. They're eating the kidneys. They're eating the heart. They're eating the liver. They're going to leave like the cuts that we prize today. And so there's that inherent knowledge of the nutrient density of organ meats, things like iron, terpenes, phenols, like your secondary compounds that we're only beginning to understand what those are and what they mean. There's nothing more nutrient dense than liver and other organ meats.
How do you cook it? How do you serve it up?
Man, I'm a big fan of our Force of Nature grinds. So it's called the Ancestral Blend. We made those with the intention to make it easy to
more palatable.
Yeah, more palatable. So it's like in the right ratio of the animal. So if it's a cow and we're, getting 600 pounds of meat off that cow, what's the right amount for a whole heart to go in there and a whole liver? Livers are huge, and then grind that up, and it's really non-intimidating and it's really easy to cook it. And it's just that threshold where if it was maybe a little bit more organy, it might be off-putting, but it's just right there where you're sneaking it in and you're getting all the nutritional benefits of it. And it is just, it's rocket fuel, man.
It makes great. We make taco meat. We make meatballs. It goes really well in pasta. I try to eat it as just a burger, and you can kind of taste the organ if you eat it without the flavor. But like our daughter will eat, we make a bolognese, Stella will eat the shit out of that bolognese. She's eating all this organ meat, and it's like, it's really good for her. We also, Serenity made a liver and beef bone broth drink for Della when she was a baby.
Oh, nice.
She boil that and puree it and then strain it and we could put it in a bottle. It
Yeah.
was like a bone broth, liver,
Oh, dude, that's genius.
bone broth that supplemented, post 6 months was supplemented the breast milk.
So good, dude.
And I'll put that recipe in the show notes here.
Yeah,
Gave her that taste for liver, and now she's eating liver,
it's amazing.
liver bolognese.
Dude, I mean, when we first talked with you and Serenity so many moons ago, I mean, like, it just makes so much sense. Like we were talking and we were saying, like, what's the most nutrient dense food a baby should eat? Well, it's probably breast milk. And then you look at like conventional wisdom, medical wisdom, it's like little kids are eating shit. It's all sugar, it's processed, a lot of it's just oddly shelf stable with other types of secondary stabilizers. And it's like, dude, what about meat? Like, why are so few children eating meat? And there's just something where people are afraid to feed babies meat, but babies have been able to eat meat, and they've eaten meat for hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, like, we didn't have the luxury of like grinding up, like pureeing avocados and like blueberries and bananas in Texas for tens of thousands of years. And so like, what did the indigenous do? Like, what did the original native inhabitants of this land did? They took things like liver, like bone marrow, more soft textured foods, and they would pulverize them, and then the babies would eat them.
And bone broth was a common baby, but the original formula was bone broth was like breast milk plus bone broth.
Yeah.
And
there maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the meat is the most digestible food for babies. It's the most similar to breast milk of any of the foods, besides breast milk, because the animal products and the fat and it's even more similar than cow's milk because it's just more digestible. So, a lot of people don't know that, but a lot of people are catching on. Serenity Kids baby foods are proof. People are getting it that babies need meat.
Dude, our little girls have such an advantage in life because they were introduced to meat at such a young age. And I think what happens now when people are skittish or they just don't have the palatability for real whole foods, it's because they weren't introduced to real whole foods as children. And so like, you can't just feed your child terrible bullshit and then like when they're of the age of, how old's Della? 7?
Yeah, she's almost 7. Yeah.
Okay, like that's when you expect them to start eating
right,
whole foods, meats, vegetable. That doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
it has to start.
And she loves sugar, she loves processed food. It's not like she is an all paleo kid all day long, but like she will eat the meat, she will eat vegetables. Like it's like she's got the much wider range palate than I think most kids do.
That's beautiful, man. We teach our kids the way that we've always taught them about nutrition from a really young age. We just tell them, like, when you eat this food, this is how your body responds and reacts. And it's really basic, but like, do you want to be strong? Then you eat animals that are strong. You eat pasture raised bison, that bison in that field running around, see how fast it is. That is the energy that you want to consume if you want to be strong. And it's like the same thing with speed. Like, do you want to be fast? Okay, well then, like, what about that deer? What about that pronghorn antelope? And so really thinking about nutrition in the form that they can understand. And, like, there's been a couple times where we've deviated from that and our kids have gotten sick eating processed foods.
Yep.
It's like, okay, how did your body feel when you ate that? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I felt like shit, Dad. Okay, that's what happens when you
deviate. Probably the exact word she used to, I'm guessing. It.
It's like you have God food created by, like, this source in its most perfect form, and then you have man food, which is like created in a laboratory separated from nature. And so like teaching your kids to differentiate between the two, they're completely capable of understanding that.
I love that concept, God food, man food. How else do you teach them about environmental stewardship or ranching or animals?
Man, we referenced The Lion King already, but it's a great story. It's awesome. But like the cycle of life is just a huge thing. Like there's just this like idea that when we die, like our energy will be cycled back into the earth and will be reborn and reimagined and expressed in a different form, like a different physical form. And so it's really thinking about the interconnectedness, the importance of death as a part of life and the cycle. You can't remove death and expect life. Yeah. They're inseparably connected. And so to teach that and then just have an appreciation and a reverence for nature, like as little as going out and watching birds, singing with birds, digging up earthworms, talking about what they're doing. I mean, we celebrate all things bright and beautiful. Not only our animals that we raise, our domestic animals, our wild animals, but also the migratory animals, like calling them out and thanking them for being a part of our ecosystem. It's just really intentional, and just try to normalize that all matter is sacred. And so when I say matter, I'm saying like all physical form is an expression. There's a golden thread of light through it all, and it's all interconnected. And so we just say thank you to everything.
That's great. Have they ever had any aversion to the killing or the blood or?
They have and they haven't. It's interesting when we do a lot of our field harvest events. It's the kids who are the most stoked on it for the most part. Like the parents can be squeamish at times, but then you'll look around, you'll see some kid with a stick, like poking an eyeball of a dead bison, or just like pulling out a pocket knife and like cutting off, like trying to like cut the tongue off. So kids, you know, like there's this socialization where that eventually is normalized, that's weird or fringe or taboo. But a lot of parents have already kind of fallen in that pattern of not understanding the relationship between life and death. And our kids, you know, like Scout she's a girly girl. She like lives on a ranch, and she'll drink bison blood flowing out of a bison's neck, but she'll also, on the other hand, like put on a ballet outfit and work on her pirouettes for hours. And so she's interesting cat, and sometimes she's really into it and sometimes she's not really into it. And so it's just kind of go with the flow of what makes sense. But I think if you try to force it, you can traumatize your kid.
We brought Dell to your turkey harvest every year. You host this amazing event where people when you're coming out to select a turkey and do all the processing, everything from the kill step through the cleaning and defeathering and all that. Which is really cool. When she was a toddler, we had to try to keep her out of the blood and guts. She just wanted to like dive in and play in all the blood and guts. No problem at all with the blood or all that. It was just very normal for her. And then there's a few years in there. I mean, our first conversation about death, I think she was 3, came after that. She was like, "Where'd the turkey go?" We're like, "Well, it's in the cooler." She's like, no, where'd the turkey go? We're like, okay, so this is about death and this is where they go. We don't know where they go, but you can believe what you want. And it's a lot of conversations like that have come from that. These days, she loves animals. She loves nature. She's very, very into nature. She won the school's like Nature Protector Award. And so she has a hard time with the death. Like she's averse to it. She has this recognition that it's natural and it's important and that it's real. Like she doesn't think it's wrong, but she like is kind of not wanting to be too close to it. So this last couple of years, she's like not wanted to see the kill step, but then she like helped with the processing, or she like cut the feathers off and we did art with the feathers. She has bones from every turkey on her altar.
That's awesome.
She keeps a bone from every single one.
See, that's cool.
Yeah. So it's like, she doesn't love the idea of killing the animal, but also understands it and is, has reverence for it.
And I mean, that's kind of goes back to some of this idea of just being a father and embracing like the masculine archetype where it needs to be embraced. And I mean, historically, kind of traditionally, men are the ones who do the killing and who do the processing. And then it's the women who do the preparation and that make the secondary products like the crafts or the tan the hides and create the clothing and all that stuff. So that's within her. But I think you guys just nailed it on introducing this concept and the flow. I mean, really, it's just a flow of energy. Energy can neither be created or destroyed. It's just always changing. And so to tell Della or Scout that this animal that gave its life, you are consuming it and it is becoming a part of you. Like when a kid understands, that is just so powerful. Like, holy smokes, that's going to be me? Yeah, like I want to eat a healthy animal, a fast animal, a strong animal, not a sick animal or a weak animal. And then it truly is that simple. And one of the things that we always tell people at our animal harvest events is like, hey, raise your hand if you're pregnant out here. And there'll always be like 1 or 2 couples that raise their hand. And it's like, this bison or this turkey that we're harvesting today, the information that it contains will inform your body and will become a part of your child. Like, I mean, it's just so wild and we neglect that, but it's like the mitochondria, the coherence, the life source, the energy, it's like, it's more than just calories, protein, fat. It's information that informs us that we can either be sick or we can be healthy depending on how we source our food.
Yeah. It's awesome. A lot of people think of ranchers as like, it's about animals. It's about raising these animals. You raise them, you slaughter them, you make money off them, you eat them. And I've really heard you identify more as like a land steward as opposed to like, it's not just about the animals, it's about the land itself. So tell me about being a land steward.
Yeah, that's a good call out. I think one of the things about regenerative agriculture, what we're doing is really It's like if we wanted to dance with Mother Nature, like first of all, you got to get permission. And if you get permission and you tell nature, like, I want you to lead, like you show me and I'm going to follow you. And so that's the level of intimacy that we're trying to experience. And so we have the humility of saying we're not in charge. Like we can set the stage for creation and we can co-create. We can be a part of the system. But at the end of the day, the system is bigger than us. We're a small part of it. We can act as keystone species. We can act like bison and disproportionately create a positive return with how we manage landscapes. But it's really more than the animal. Like you have to think about it holistically. And one kind of like way to think about it is if you take care of the land, it takes care of you. Or if you focus on the small things like soil health, then the big things take care of themselves, like habitat and water infiltration. And so
river came back on your property, right? The river that had been dry for years returned.
Dude, I mean, I would love to take credit for that, but that was the bison calling in the rain. That was the soil having the structure to capture rain. And that was the aquifer underneath us being able to recharge. And so, yeah, we got to co-create in that process, but it's so much bigger than us. And so to have a title like farmer or rancher, I feel like that kind of comes at it from the wrong perspective where you are enforcing your will, you're in charge. We're not in charge.
Yeah.
And so it's really just stepping back, saying I'm a part of this ecosystem and I do my best to steward it in the right direction.
I see a really common thread in all of your answers to my questions around this. Like, what did you feed your wife? Well, what she told me she wanted to eat.
Yeah.
You know, how was your baby born? How the baby wanted to be born. You know, like when did you decide to bring people in? Well, when it felt right. When, you know, when the energy was there. Like, how do you get a bison to move you out? Being a man in our society is taught to be like in control or the powerful one or the dominant one or to own or to possess. And versus what you're describing is much more about surrenders, about supports, about service, which is also very manly because you're doing things like moving bison herds and slaughtering, you know, large mammals.
It's totally true, man.
Yeah.
You can ask land or your child to do something, but you can never demand it. You can never demand and control and dominate either your child or land in a way that you're enforcing your will and telling it what to be, because you're not being true to what that land was hewn from for the billions of years that it was there, what it wants to be, as well as your child, as we kind of iterated already on their soul, like to allow them to express who they're going to become. I believe truly that each of our children they're born with divine information and expression within them. And it's our job to facilitate that coming out. They're not born as empty vessels. Like they're not born in this context where we need to fill them with information. We need to shape and mold them and we can influence them, but we really have to let them, you know, blossom and bloom and express themselves as they're supposed to.
Yeah. My wife Serenity talks a lot about how if you believe in evolution, that every new generation is slightly more evolved. So our kids are actually more evolved than us. So it's like we're sort of making way for this next version of human that is probably undetectable scientifically, but like if you look at how they act and who they are, it's like she's definitely more evolved than me. I can tell you that right now.
Wild.
But I think a lot about this image of the getting the matriarchal bison to move, and that when I think about everything I want my daughter to do, I try to get her to do, or I'm encouraging her to do. It's sort of like that. It's like it has to be worth her while. Like she has to know it's greener pasture that I'm inviting her to. She has to trust me that if I open this gate, it's going to be better. And also that if she refuses to move, she's not going to go through it. Does that happen where they just don't move and they just stay in one? You just say, okay, they're not moving today.
It can happen.
Yeah.
Very rare.
Right.
Only happens when they're like, there's still badass grass in here. Why are you moving me?
Yeah.
Like, this is still so
not
awesome.
done, guys.
Yeah, this is so good right now. Or, I mean, like, they nest too, just like humans. Like, when you're about to have a baby and you're preparing and you're anticipating, there will be a point a week or two before that bison gives birth where it's just like, you want me to move? Middle finger. Yeah. I'm not moving. I'm having my baby right here. I like this spot. And so, again, you're not in control. If you force that to happen, it's going to backfire right in your face.
So they don't refuse very often, but the fact that they know they can refuse and that you're going to trust and respect that, I think that's key for parenting. Is like most of the time they're going to do what you want, but if like you force them to those few times where they refuse, that's like it damages that trust, and now it'll be harder every day after that.
Every day they won't forget. Or forgive you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Fitness, you guys are still, I mean, ranching is hard work. Do you still have a fitness practice? Still athletes?
We do. I mean, that's always been a part of us. And dad strength is for real. I remember,
Yeah.
you know, like being in middle school and high school, like meeting my girlfriend's parents and shaking their father's hand for the first time, which is really important to do.
Yeah.
I remember being like, holy shit, that guy's got a strong ass grip. And when you have a baby, you just
All the lifting.
fucking
Yeah.
get jacked because
Yeah.
you're carrying a child all
Constant.
the time. It's an awesome way to like have a rucksack that's portable and just lift heavy stuff, which I love doing. But yeah, from a fitness perspective, try and involve our kids with us. And then also it's not as much about quantity now, but more quality. And then also just thinking about fitness more holistic. So of course, we're still getting after it, using our bodies, working outside, doing gym stuff, running, but we're also intentionally getting sunlight. We're intentionally getting grounded, putting bare feet on the ground, doing fire and ice, some kind of contrast therapy. And the kids can come along for a lot of that stuff. And,
How do you involve the kids in the workouts? What's that look like?
you know, if we go on family hikes, we're carrying them up mountains, carrying them up hills. Now they're at the fun age where we can all go on a bike ride together, which is amazing. So fun. Been waiting for this moment in our time. And so that's great. And then also like if we're just in the gym getting jacked or trying to get jacked, setting them up in the corner to do a little art craft. I mean, like they're
around it.
constantly watching what you do as a parent. And so every one of your actions is being imprinted in their psyche, maybe subconsciously. And so, yeah, like what kind of role model do you want to be? Do you want to display these positive habits? I mean, it's almost your duty to work out, to honor your body and to display like what it means to be strong. And that's like a sacred thing that we inherently need to cherish. But if you're like sitting around, drinking beer, getting overweight, living a sedentary lifestyle, you're teaching your child that's normal behavior.
Yeah.
So like, I almost feel like now fitness is, we love it. It's part of our identity. I've never dreaded working out a day in my life, but now I am more motivated to work out for my kids.
Yeah, there was a study that Serenity found that was like on the health impacts of children of their parents working out or not. There was this study that compared kids and how they turned the lifetime health effects of their parents working out around them, like them seeing their parents work out, was like documentable.
That's badass.
In the data.
I believe it.
So she's like, it like had her double down on her
100%.
working out and doing it in front of her and talking about it. And yeah, Della's always like she's picking up weights and, running and trying to do gymnastics and stuff. So
it's so cute, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think about working out almost, like if you're on the airplane and they're going through the pre-flight script and they're like, hey, in the case of emergency, these oxygen masks are going to deploy.
Yeah.
Put yours on first, you idiot. Cause you can't take care of others if your mask isn't on, if you're not getting oxygen. And so it's like for working out to me, it's that. It's like I have to take care of myself physically and spiritually and emotionally in order to provide for my family.
Yeah. You've talked a lot about being a servant, being manslave, as you called it. How do you take care of yourself? What are the things you make sure to keep so you can do that well?
Yeah, pretty easy. I mean, just outdoor, light, exercise, family time's important, which we get a lot of, and just being immersed in the wonder of nature. I think another thing that's really important that's often overlooked is like our attention is maybe our most precious resource as a man. There's algorithms that try to hack that. There's food that is made in laboratories that try to steal that try to manipulate our biological behaviors. And so it's like, how do you intentionally create time where your attention can't get hijacked? And maybe that's meditation, maybe it's self-reflection, maybe it's just being creative, maybe it's praying. But I think that is just a pillar of health that you have to protect because it's so easy to lose.
So even during that like most challenging postpartum period, that couple of months after baby was born, you still found time to work out or to go outside, or how'd you make that?
Yeah. Just, in shifts. No more 3-hour bike rides, that's for sure. No more training for a marathon, which is okay because it's just a different season in our lives, and I'm all good. And of course, there's sacrifices, and I'm happy to make those sacrifices for being a parent. But yeah, you just get it in. You're not on your schedule. You don't plan your workouts. You're not like, I'm gonna work out between these hours of this day. That's bye-bye. That's more like, God, our kid is sleeping. Let's go get jacked.
Yeah.
Let's go lift weights. Let's go run. And so it's just modifying. But yeah, it's just dividing and conquer with Katie. Someone's on baby patrol, which does suck when you're in the middle of a workout and then your child wakes up. That's the worst ever.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's the season. It's the reality.
Yeah. I do a lot of Della squats, I call them. She rides on my back.
That's awesome.
I do squats and she counts for me.
Yeah.
And so we see how many I can do. She tries to test me. So
Oh my
I
God.
go to exhaustion with Della squats.
Have you done Della push-ups? I've done
I
some of those.
have. Those
That
are
is
really hard.
freaking
When she was littler, I did those.
Yes,
When she was like 2, I could do Della push-ups, but now I've
Bro.
a couple, but she's
Yeah.
40 pounds now.
That is a
so.
good one. And also just wrestling with, I don't know if you guys
Oh
wrestle.
yeah, I love that.
Yes.
It's like acro. I sort of thinking more like acro yoga
Yeah.
than wrestling because
It's
she's
so
a little more like dancing, flipping around.
And kids like,
She loves that stuff.
like my girls, like when they want to connect with their mom, it's like an emotional connection. And that's the inherent relationship they have. But when they want to connect with me, it's like, let's get physical.
Yeah.
Let's wrestle
Around and-
Like, let's
yeah.
just get dirty. Let's play. Let's chase each other. And so, yeah, it's a different relationship, but that's pretty special. Yeah. That's valuable.
Cool. Well, I always like to end on one thing you wish you would have known.
Man. So we have 2 kids.
Mhm.
So this is going to be like having a second kid gave me the perspective of what I wish I would have known so that I could do it with my second kid. And that is, I'm sure you've heard people tell you this, but it's so true. It's the days feel like years and the years feel like days when you're in that newborn phase. But what I'm trying to do with my second kid is just like, this is this one moment in your life that you have to be so aware and so present because it's fleeting. Like it goes so quickly. And it's just, this is the best thing you're ever going to create in your whole entire life. It's perfect. And so to hold that thing and to love it. I mean, like truly when I like look at a baby that was created from my wife and I, it's like peeking beneath the veil. It's like, where does the divine and the human end? Like it's a continuum. Where does like heaven and where does earth end and begin? I think it's all the same. And it's like you're looking at this light in their eyes and it's the light within all light. And like the love you feel is the love that is within all love. And you truly like smell this thing. And it's like, I think that's what God smells like. You feel the skin and this is what God feels like. And it's so easy to overlook that. Like it's so easy to be just suffering and you're like sleep deprived and you're stressed and you're not getting to do the things that, you know, your ego tells you your identity, who it is. But dude, you have to slow down and you have to just like cherish that because it freaking goes so fast. I mean, it's crazy. These kids grow up so fast. And so there's nothing more like the best thing that I've ever done in my life is hold a baby, like my baby. I don't really want to hold any other babies. No offense to other babies, but it's just not the same. But yeah, hold your damn baby and just love every second of it. And just like, you're going to wish you could freeze that moment and relive it forever. And so like, don't take it for granted. Just be there, be hyper present. That's what I would say.
It's great. It's great advice. Thank you. Awesome. Well, people can find Epic Bars basically everywhere. It's not your company anymore, but they can get a little taste of you if they want a nutrient-dense snack. They still taste great. General Mills hasn't ruined them yet.
That's true.
And then Rome Ranch, amazing place. If you're ever in Texas, check it out. The turkey harvest in November. Or you guys do bison harvests for groups. If you want to organize that through the Rome Ranch website, we'll put a link to that. And then Force of Nature. It's incredible. What you're doing with Force of Nature, making it easy to get the best of the best meats, best for the planet, best meat what is on the planet for the planet.
Best meat on the planet for the planet.
Yes.
I mean, we just think that this is this amazing moment in time where consciousness is really shifting and people are starting to recognize the interconnectedness between the health of the land and the health of our civilization, the health of our bodies. So Force of Nature, it's this celebration of all things bright and beautiful. I mean, it is giving consumers, as we talked about earlier, the opportunity to vote with their dollars for a system in which is virtuous and good. And as a dad, I think about like, what kind of world do I want my kid to grow up in? And how do I create that world? And you create that world by supporting companies like Serenity Kids and Force of Nature that are founded on these principles. I mean, it'd be so easy for our brands to like, maybe we're going to just kind of like do second tier sourcing. We'll like be able to offer our products cheaper, have better product margins, but it's not the right thing to do. And so I don't know. I just think that business has this tremendous opportunity to drive change, create consciousness. And so, yeah, just please check out forceofnature.com and follow us. And
You know, I think no vegan can say, well, you can't find regenerative meats. You know, we'd eat them if we could, but they're just so hard to find. It's better just to be vegan because it's so hard to find. It takes away that argument as like any grocery stores all over the country, on the website, you know, mail order. It comes, you know, in a couple of days.
Yeah.
You could literally eat all your meat at Force of
back.
Nature if you wanted to be that ethical and say like, I only eat regenerative meat.
Yep.
You could order Force of Nature all day long and eat nothing but that and be super healthy. So,
And I think you guys are like us, like Force of Nature. Say, first thing you should do is go to the farmer's market and shake a rancher's hand.
yeah.
And you're probably like, hey, before you buy Serenity Kids, make your own food or like
Sure.
feed your child the milk flowing from your breast if you
Yeah,
can.
right.
Right. And so like
Right.
that's an interesting position to be in as a business. We're saying there are better options, but we got your back with Force of Nature and Serenity Kids. If that local hyper regional support network isn't there, support us because we're doing the right thing and you can trust us.
Totally. And you have your own podcast as well, which we'll put a link to.
Where hope grows, baby.
Yeah, where hope grows. You're cool. You get into a lot of these spiritual concepts of regeneration and land management. That's really cool. And some great farmers on there. So yeah, really appreciate having you in our lives and everything you've done for the planet and our health and your beautiful girls. Just couldn't be more grateful.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate our time together.
Yeah, glad you're here. Thanks everybody and stay dedicated.
Bam,
Go.
brother.